I'm from the land. Don't say you hate LA if you ain't been below the 10. One of the truest statements of many true statements that Kendrick Lamar has stated. And most of us who are from LA have made this claim many times. Most people that hate LA have only been to Hollywood. They've never been to LA. North of the 10 is the freeway, the 10 freeway that anybody else would call the I-10. We don't call our freeways I anything. It's the, which a small piece of history is because our freeways weren't just numbers. They used to be locations. So the 10 was the Santa Monica freeway. The 110 was the Harbor freeway. The 60 was the Pomona freeway. So it was named after city. So you'd call it the Harbor. So like now it's the 110. Anyway, you wouldn't know that because you're not from the land. What do we mean by the land? We're talking about the entire culture. It's not just being born here. It's about embracing the territories and jurisdiction thereof, and all that comes with understanding our slang, our way of life, and all that. And we have no problem naturalizing citizens. Obviously, you got to put in some work. But what we love and respect is like, even if you rep the land, even if you live here, you know where you're from. That can never be taken from you. And that's something that we value. And if you know me and also Sophie, you cut us open, we bleed Los Angeles. And Sophie is, she's from the West Side, but the part of the West Side she's from is one that would never, ever, 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 I would ever question her certification. Sophie, a real one. And although she may not live here now, nothing can take that away from her. But what makes somebody from where they from? I am from South Central, but I was born at the Fox Hills Hospital in Inglewood. But as many times as I've said in my music, I'm from the 626. What does that even mean? 626 is 20 minutes east. That's where I grew up. So as far as street terms, yeah, I went to high school in the Inland Empire. Lived there for a little bit. You would say, are you from where you went to high school? Well, no, because that's not in my soil. It's part of my story. I am from Los Angeles. Can't take that. But how long do you have to be somewhere before you can rep it? What do you have to embrace? Like, what makes you from? Why are we, as said in many lyrics, at least as I've said, West Coast, we get defensive about our homeland. Listen, I admitted we are easily offended because a lot of our reputation comes from transplants. Like a lot of the stuff that people don't like about LA is people that's not from LA. So that kind of bothers us sometimes because it's like, you're not even from here. Yeah, and if you're going to come here and talk trash about us, like, have you even seen Los Angeles? You've seen Hollywood. You're talking about the Palisades. You only know Altadena because it caught on fire. That's the only reason you know what that is. So we're very defensive about our homeland. But at the same time, if you were born here and left immediately, your family packed up, you can't help that. Your family packed up, moved to Colorado, you grew up there. And if I met you and you was hella granola, then I would be like, oh, you from Denver? And they'd say, well, I was born in LA. Am I allowed to tell this person they not from LA? That's where you, I mean, you can't, that is an immutable, unless I have a time machine. This fool's from LA. Do they carry our culture? No, because they wasn't raised in it. Their home was different. But I can't take that from you. It would be ridiculous to say that your citizenship has nothing to do with where you were born. We need to talk about the history of birthright citizenship. Hood politics, y'all. I love this. I love these times where I get to do something that I think can be a little more evergreen, if you will, meaning I can record this at any time because of the way that our politics is set up is going to be relevant for a long time, right? And has been relevant for a long time because we're talking about the 14th Amendment. Now, here is my premise. as President Trump so brazenly suggested that we need to change the 14th Amendment, that if your parents were here illegally, you are not a citizen, no longer, no matter where you were born. And I made statements about, like, you need to take this man serious. While most of you internet constitutional scholars are like, it's going to get shut down. It has to get shut. Of course, they're going to shut it. It is a it's in the Constitution. You can't just not have it in the Constitution. To which I responded, take him serious. And some of my more, brunching liberal friends, shout out my dog in my group text, he's very calm about this and has evidence, and it did happen, that the Supreme Court shut it down. But I feel like we're dealing with a different animal, which is why I want to give you this history here, because his ever so young sidekick, Mr. J.D. Vance, is like, hey, listen, if the Supreme Court would tell a general what to do, none of us would take that serious, because that's not its jurisdiction. If a Supreme Court would tell the Attorney General what they should prosecute, we would all be like, that's an overstep of power. You're not supposed to do that. So why are we saying when the president has something to say, the executive branch, why is that not an overstepping of bounds? Now, this logic is essentially a constitutional crisis, which we'll talk about later. But what he's basically saying is, why does the president have to listen to the courts? Now, I need you to pause for a second and think about what just came out of my mouth. Why does the president have to listen to the courts? Because it's the court's job to decide what is, say it with me, constitutional. So if the president decides he don't need to listen to the courts, and you saying, I don't worry about birthright citizenship because it's in the Constitution, I feel like you're not paying attention. Like you ain't been around for the past 2016 and beyond. What I'm trying to say is, this man is a different animal. But in your defense, and for your information, we've been here before. Allow me to introduce you to Wong Kim Ark. I love this stuff, y'all. Now, before I could take you back to San Francisco in May of 1896, before I could do that, I got to take you back to something that I've taught y'all before, which was the Dred Scott case, which is where we get the 14th Amendment. There's going to be a lot of review in here because I'm still trying to teach y'all something. This is teacher prop. You feel me? Mr. Petty. Shout out all my old students that listen to this show. They grown now, but we've talked about how the Supreme Court works, but we also talked about specifically this Dred Scott case. And the Dred Scott case was essentially a slave who got free. This was during the separate but equal time. This was during the time that, well, no, this was before separate but equal. What am I talking about? This is during slavery, right? So during this era when the country was growing, and if a new state came in, for every free state, there had to be a slave state. For every slave state, there had to be a free state. For some reason, we have not learned the lesson that you cannot placate races. Still, we ain't learned that. But at the time, this is what was going on. Now, remember, the argument, at least the front-facing argument of the Confederate States, was that the states have rights, and that the states' rights should not be abridged by the federal rights. We want a small federal government. Y'all are just there to make sure the paperwork gets pushed through, but we carry the rights that we have. And in my state, it's segregation now, segregation forever. Like they trying to keep their way of life going without the encroachment of those city northerners, right? Well, one of these brothers escaped, Dred Scott, and he escaped north. Now, when a slave escapes, the owner gets to hire a slave hunter, which eventually becomes the police. They evolve into the police. I wish I was making this stuff up. But anyway, this brother gets to a free state, And again, since states have rights, once you cross these borders, just like Mexico said there's no slavery in Mexico. So if a slave gets to Mexico, look up the city of Veracruz, Richie Valens and go look up that area. Why is there so many black people there? Well, besides it being a part of the transatlantic slave trade, if you got there, you was free. We've had centuries of solidarity, despite what people may think, or even what some of these young folks might say. There's been centuries of solidarity among us. Anyway, so Dred Scott got up north, started a business, became a family, because in the state that he's living, he's free. He's been able to dodge these slave hunters. But one day the slave hunter found him and was like, hey, you're our property. We got to go back. And the state he was in was like, what are you talking about? They're like, no. He escaped from our plantation. He is my property. They're like, the fuck he's not. This man ain't going nowhere. Whether they were anti-racist or not, they was like, you don't get to tell me what to do in my house. Does that make sense? You ever been in a situation where it's like, it's not so much that I think you right or wrong. I just don't think you get to tell me what to do about it. This is what's happening. They was like, you don't get to tell us who's a citizen and who's not. We have rights. And the southern state was like, we also have rights. I've been hired by a person to do a job. This person has not been freed. They are still legally the property of somebody. Say, hold on. Let me stop you right there, Chief. That's according to your state. This man don't live in your state. This man run a business here. He got family. He got children. This man live right there. We shop at his store. He's a citizen of our state. It was like, no, he not. Yes, he is. No, he not. Yes, he is. All the way to the Supreme Court. And like I told y'all before, it's a lot of times the Supreme Court is not really about the case itself. It's about the principle of the case. So the principalities of the situation was whose state laws gets to trump who else's state law. At some reason, I don't know why these people did not think that this moment was coming. That one of these situations was going to be like that, where you have to decide between two states that have differing laws. Does this sound familiar to you? You ever heard of abortion? Are we not dealing with this right now? This is why we keep trying to say, look, we need a federal law to calm all this stuff down. So this thing goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And it's not so much about Dred Scott himself. It's about, whose laws trump whose? And wait a minute, what is a citizen then? Because if this person's a citizen, they are entitled to certain inalienable rights. I love history. So the Supreme Court had to be like, oh, I don't know. And remember I told you how the Supreme Court works? It's a whole gang of what ifs. So they shot a ton of what ifs. Ooh, I got stuff all in my beard. Y'all ain't saying nothing. It's soap, I promise. I just showered because now I got to do this stuff visually. Anyway, so they shot a whole lot of what ifs. All right, so what if this? What if this? What if this? And eventually the court decided, in typical American fashion, Dred Scott's got to go back. So he had to go back and be a slave again. So the 14th Amendment, after the Civil War and Reconstruction, was designed to fix that. To say, this is absurd. Okay, if you are born here within the jurisdiction and territories of the United States, you are in fact a citizen. So if you are a citizen, you have zero right to enslave another citizen. Can we just what are we even talking about? That's the deal. Now, this is the basis of the conversation that we're talking about. Now, obviously, if you racist, that don't sit right with you. There's a part of you that feels like we know what we mean when we say American, an American citizen. And that feeling has not changed because it has traveled all the way through the 2025 presidential election. They know what they mean when just like the same thing they know what they mean when they say DEI. And it's funny watching people saying, oh man, 150 people on stage during Kendrick Lamar's performance and not a single white guy. Oh, you want diversity, equity, and inclusion? Does that feel unfair to you? I seen a picture of Governor Abbott out of Texas in his wheelchair because apparently he hurt himself. rolling into his office. And I'm like, I wonder if he used ramps that were installed because of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But you know, it's the new hard R. Anyway, the Dred Scott case says, this is the 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. One of those things where it's like, all right, clearly we have to stay this. So now we're saying it. But that's not what I want to talk about today. That's your precursor. You feel me? That's your prequel. I want to talk about Wong Kim Ark after this. We're back. So, Wong Kim Ark, a brother from the 1800s, clearly Chinese, born in San Francisco. As a matter of fact, we had an address, and I'm going to tell you where the address is a little later. But why is he so special? Well, let me talk to you about him. So, Wong Kim Ark was, like I said, born in San Francisco, but he became the subject of what's called a test case in 1896. What is this test case? It's a test case about the 14th Amendment. Now, have you ever been the test case of something? It really don't feel good. You ever been in a situation where a bunch of y'all have done a bunch of things, but you the one that got in trouble? They just want to see. You feel me? Right? That's awful. I've been to test case a few times where it's like, well, let me see how serious we are about this. A test case, right? And a lot of times it's the luck of the draw, because you have to, again, remember that the Supreme Court is not dealing in their brain. It's not humans we talk about. We're talking about abstract concepts of the law. So the persons involved in these things really are besides the point to them, which is why they seem so heartless. But if you can find a Supreme Court justice that understands the humanity of it all, you win it. Anyway, I'm going to tell you his whole narrative, but I'm going to cut to the beginning of the scene, because I think the movie should start with this moment. It's been a 3-month journey. 3 months. No. It takes about a month. A month journey coming back from China. This brother is a cook. He got it out the mud. He was back in China visiting his parents and his newly found wife. And like every immigrant story, you know, you grind away, you know, you send money back, you know what I'm saying? Try to support the family, try to support yourself, to try to make ends meet, get your weight up, get your lady here, just have a great life, right? His wife is from China, which I'll talk about later. But he, again, was born in San Francisco, but he's been going back and forth. So obviously he speaks the language, he understands the culture, he's doing what he can. And because he lives in Chinatown, a lot of his cultural sort of presentation is Chinese because of segregation, like I'll talk about later. And while he was gone, something crazy happened in America, but he don't know that yet. He gets to the port, pulls out his papers, and he's like, all right, what's up, y'all? How y'all doing? I'm glad to be back. I've been gone for a while. I'm glad to be here. They was like, hold up, cuz, where you going? And he was like, I'm going home. They was like, are you a citizen? He's like, what the hell are you talking about? Pulls out his papers, right? So he pulls out his papers, and get this about the papers. He kind of knew this was coming, because you got to go get it all notary republic, you know, to prove that you are who you say you are. So just like a leftover from slavery about free slaves had to show them papers. Basically, if anybody that don't look American, wink, wink, you need to carry papers. So he carrying papers, and those papers have to be certified by, get this, 3 white witnesses, because that'll stand up in the court of law. That'll prove that he was born where he said, yes, I grew up with homeboy. I seen him over there. You know, here it is. I'm from here. But what was happening in the time that he left to go see his girl and came back with something called the Chinese Exclusion Act. Now, let me put you on some game if you don't know what the Chinese Exclusion Act is. I'm going to read from the National Archives. Listen, the Chinese Exclusion Act was approved on May 6, 1882. It was the first significant law restricting immigration into the United States. In the spring of 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by Congress and signed by President Chester A. Arthur. Have you even heard of that president? The act provided, watch this, an absolute 10-year ban on Chinese laborers immigrating into the United States. For the first time, federal law prescribed entry of an ethnic working group on the premise that it endangered the good order of certain localities. This happened while he was gone. The government decided, let me tell you what's wrong with racism. Back it up a little bit, because a few decades ago, y'all was loving the Chinese coming. Now, why was they loving the Chinese coming? As we know, the Chinese were the people that ended up building our railroad system, doing a lot of the hard work, opening up our laundries. They did all that good stuff. Now, why you think that happened? Nigga, they freed the niggers. Because, well, we can't make the niggers work, so we got to find somebody else to work. It seemed to me like what I'm learning is, because after this happened, now, does this sound familiar to you? Because who doing our work now? The Mexicans, right? It seemed to me like Americans just don't like to work. Like, y'all, it just, why you keep bringing other people to do the work and then complaining you ain't got no work? Because what had happened was America decided, okay, it's too many of y'all. It's too many of y'all. I don't like looking at y'all gotta go. And don't be bringing no more. Don't be bringing no more Chinese. My grandma used to say that. She used to say Chinese. I'll be like, Grandma, you can't. I mean, she old as hell, obviously, but she was like, yeah, I'm gonna go get Chinese food. And I'm like, Grandma. She'd say, what? She give you that look, and I'm like, I can't correct her. Anyway, this happened while he was gone. So they looking at him like, are you a laborer? He's like, yeah, I'm a laborer, but I'm a citizen. They was like, I don't know about that, Chief. Wait right here. So he sat there and waited. Now, even though he had the paperwork that basically is like, yo, whose man's is this? Is this your boy? Hey, who know cuz? They have to ask white people, hey, do you know cuz? This is ridiculous. But this was our laws, people. They was like, we don't know if you're a citizen. He like, I got the white boys to prove it. I can see my house. I live right there. And not only do I live right there, fam, I was born right there. I have never moved. I've never applied for no citizenship nowhere else. There's no confusion on no paperwork. My wife is still in China. I don't understand what the problem is. I say this to say, just because something in the Constitution, don't think for 1 second that you really protected if you got a little melanin, is all I'm trying to say. This is why I'm bringing this up. We have been here before. The challenge of birthright citizenships. Now, in this moment, this thing goes all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, why they picked this is because they're like, wait a minute, we need to stress test this law. And like I said, the way the Supreme Court works, when there is something on the books, you need to make sure. I'm going to stretch this as far and as absurdly as I possibly can, because I'll need to see where it breaks. I need to see the edges. Now, conceptually, like I said, this is actually a great practice, because that's how you know if a law is written well or is good, is once you start throwing absurdities at it, if it still stands, if you could take it, then it's good. It's the same with people and rappers. Some rappers can't take the heat. They get on stage with fake bullet holes coming out their shirts. Oh, man. So the Chinese Exclusion Act was like, look, man, you can't come if you're a laborer. He's like, nigga, I was born here. They was like, you don't look like you was born here. You look like a Chinese. You talk like a Chinese. To which he could probably be like, I'm from Chinatown. But what the hell difference does that make? I'm born right there. Like, and when I say right there, I mean literally 751 Sacramento Street in Chinatown. You can go now. It's a little school now. But there's a plaque, like it's right. You can go to it. I'm born right here. Now, these were not the only laws that existed at this time that were designed to make sure that nobody else succeeds but white people. Um, there was the Page Act, which barred Chinese women, except for the wives of merchants, from entering the United States, which is why this man's wife was still in China. So he can't even bring her here, right? There's also the Geary Act, which required all Chinese immigrants to constantly walk with identification papers, kind of like freed slaves, kind of like immigrants and green cards. Is any of this sounding familiar to you? So anyway, let me give you a little more background of him, right? So that's what so the camera starts right here, right? So here's some background. So again, as he says, he was born on like the living room floor in what is now a school, but it used to be like a little store with an apartment on top of it, a store that his parents ran, right? 751 Sacramento Ave, right? So he was born there, and just like that, like if your parents come from another country, every once in a while y'all go back, right? So he goes back one time when he was 8, his parents go back and they decide to stay. So then he comes back because, again, can't stress this enough, he's an American. So he comes back to SF again, lived here, worked for his uncle, out in Savannah, did what he had to do. He worked there, did what he had to do until he was about 20, in which case he was getting a little lonely. He needed trying to find him a lady friend. Now, because of anti-miscegenation laws, you ever heard that word? It's because it used to be illegal to marry outside your race. So because of anti-miscegenation laws, and you think this is just the 1800s, let me tell you something. It's only been the past 60 years. 70 years now? It's very recent. The way I like to think of it is like this. Michael Jordan, when he was in kindergarten, he couldn't marry a white lady. Anyway, since race mixing was illegal, and because Chinese women wasn't even allowed to come, it just wasn't a lot of Chinese girls here. Those are his only choices. It's slim pickings. So he has to cross the salt, the ocean. Another 1 month travel, which I honestly cannot imagine. I don't think I'd go anywhere. It took a month to get there. I'm good. Anyway, finds a lady. Since she can't come because he's not a merchant, he has to go back and forth, sending money, doing these. It's a hard life. I don't know if you know any immigrants. It's really a hard life. My own in-laws, like the choices that my mother-in-law, my suegra, had to make in reference to her own children. My wife it's in her book, so I don't feel bad about saying this, but she was born here, literally Boyle Heights, and then lived in Mexico in Acapulco till about 4th grade. And then one by one, her mom, so for a long time, she didn't live with her siblings. The siblings came one by one, right? Back to America as her mom can afford it. She lived with her grandma in Mexico. And then one by one, her mom was able to bring her. And I just don't know. I know I don't have the fortitude for that. To send my kids to go live, nah, I'm good. Unless the situation back home is that desperate, you feel me? That I'm like, I have to get my kids out of this life. I've been to where my wife's from. Now I'm going as someone who is from a fully developed first world country, even though I'm Black, so there's that. But I'm looking at this place like this is a tropical paradise. It's southern Mexico. It's right at the coast, Costa Chica. Like, it's freaking beautiful. Acapulco is beautiful. But as you're there, you realize, what is her best options if she stays here? Run a grocery store, have a cart on the beach, sell to tourists. Like, there's unless you're going to go be one of your ancestors and exist in the forest, there's really no, I get it. You're like, there's nothing, like, we've maxed out. There's nothing here. I don't want my kids to do what I did, which was nothing. Let's roll. Now, I don't mean that derogatory, because she had one of her uncles that was a doctor. Like, it's not like you couldn't go to college and, you know what I'm saying? But just the chances, the opportunities, I get it now. It's like, yo, we got to We got to go. And it's like, it's just, my sister's there. So I'm going to go get it out the mud and bring my children here. You know, it's an amazing thing. My father-in-law, like, he was selling little fruits in downtown, you know, Mexico City, little fruit cups, and as an 8th grader. Fam, this can't be it. You know what I'm saying? I get it. You know what I mean? So anyway, he's sending back and forth, you know, making money, figuring it out, doing what he got to do, going back and forth, seeing his lady, come back. Because again, I don't know how else to say this. He's not a Chinese citizen. He's an American. He can't stay in China. He's an American. So this was his life. So he gets there, this situation, tells him who he is. He's sitting there, and basically the answer was this. Now, if this ain't deja vu, I don't know what is. The basic argument as to why they won't let this man off this boat and he got to stay in this limbo is, if your parents are not citizens, even if you were born in the U.S., you are not a citizen of the United States. And you are barred from entry or deported from the United States. This is the 1890s. This is the 1890s. So let me tell you what happened after that next. So we're back. So what's the situation? The man's just stuck on this boat. There ain't nothing he could do, right? He's just a cook. Like, he's not breaded up. But here's what happens. The word gets out. Because again, I don't know how else to say this. He's from San Francisco. People were expecting him. So there's an entire community that is waiting to see their homeboy. I don't understand what y'all don't understand about this. And one thing that segregationists do not understand is that when you force us to live together, we form bonds. We form solidarity. We learn to look out for each other. There's one thing that I would say that I in some ways envy an experience my parents had. Now, obviously, the situation is much different, but my father went to an all-black high school. So with that, there is a certain type of solidarity among your community that while I am completely grateful, unbelievably grateful for the multicultural raising I've had, I feel like it's made me a global citizen in a way that a lot of people don't have. The full stratification, the full experience of what it means to have a community that loves you and has shared your experience is something that I don't have. Because if you go to a black school, that means you got a black principal, you got black teachers, the janitor, the mayor, everybody in your experience from every socioeconomic stratus is black. You have full representation. You are seeing your world on display, educated, uneducated, right? Worker, white collar, blue collar, you're seeing it all because we were forced to do this, right? Obviously the situation is awful, but that meant that, like, although I can remember moments where I'm like, oh yeah, Miss Rose down the street braided my sister's hair. You know what I'm saying? You have a bunch of different parents. So the guy that runs the corner store, Mr. Johnson, when I see Mr. How you doing, Mr. Johnson? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a community that comes with, and he understands what it's like to be a little black boy. My mother, my father, they had that. Now, I had it in my own way, but it was like black and Latino. Either way, the point I'm trying to make is what segregationists still don't get is that this is how we organize against your system, because organize they did. You think they just gonna leave a homeboy on that boat? You think he don't know nobody with power? So the word gets out, and 6 wealthy Chinese companies are like, oh no, we gonna fight for you. They pulled their money together and they got him a case, and they took it to the courts. They was like, this man's a citizen. Now, why would they do that? Because when you live in solidarity and when you live with each other, you understand that if it could happen to him, it could happen to us, which is, I'm going to hold my tongue here. I just don't understand how anyone could vote against the best interests of their entire community in exchange for their own goodness. I don't get it. Because again, if it can happen to them, it could happen to you. And on top of that, fuck y'all. That's my homeboy. That's my dog. I don't even care if he wrong. He with us. Whose man's with this? He with us. You got a problem with it? I got the bread. Some of that's some street stuff too. Like y'all following me, man. Like even if my little homie mouth off, like I said, you don't get to tell me what to do. It's the same prime. Even if he wrong, y'all don't get to say it. And look, I got the education. I got the bread. You ain't finna look at, I'm off this boat. I don't care how bad my accent is either. That's what I love about this moment. These are wealthy Chinese people. So they probably speak with a heavy accent. But that man that's just working the borders, you just a poor little white boy. So you may have these things you saying about them, but these men is like, listen, he can't go? All right, bet. So he posted $250 bail, which clearly he didn't have. And they thought at that time, that's like $250,000. Them rich Chinese folks was like, you need a check? I love it. I love it. So this mug goes to the courts, goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And guess what happens? I ain't gonna tell you. I'm just kidding. Of course I'm gonna tell you. So we in the courts and he fought it based on the 14th Amendment because you just said, would you like me to scroll up on my notes? You could see me scroll up on my notes to read to you the 14th Amendment again. I'm going to do that for you. The 14th Amendment. All persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction thereof is citizens of the United States and the state for which they reside. Fool, that's your law. That's what they fought on. I don't understand what you're talking about. Where was this man born? San Francisco. What is your argument? What are we talking about here? Did he win? I don't know. I'm going to tell you in a minute. But the court went crazy. It lasted for a while. There was many appeals, which is that's the reveal. He won. But he didn't get off the boat yet. The only reason he was off the boat was because he made bail. But case wasn't over. Because for some reason about white people, especially white races, they don't take too well for losing. I feel like why is Obama still get brought up? Because they still mad that a nigger was in the office. Like, I don't understand why y'all still talk about that man. That man with zero scandals, a husband of one wife with extremely successful children. What is your problem with him? I think we know. So, how could the courts have any leg to stand on to say that this man's born here, he's not a citizen? How could that make sense in any way all the way to the Supreme Court? And why would the Supreme Court take this case? It's because they have a chance to be like, again, okay, now, actually, this is interesting. Your argument is, well, his parents aren't born here, so he's not. Okay, we got time. Talk to me nice. Now, none of this mattered until white people got involved, as far as at the court level, right? And what the argument against him went like this. The 14th Amendment has some caveats. And the caveat one is about Native Americans, obviously, because none of this can count towards them. They're clearly here. You were here before us, right? But it kind of works like this. This is where the races got to dance. Actually, in the brief, this is from the brief, that like the 14th Amendment argues guarantees of citizens to all of those born in the United States. But it's got an asterisk. It's got a caveat, right? And the caveat is those who are born in the United States who are subject to its jurisdiction. Born here and subject to its jurisdiction. Well, what he's saying is jurisdiction can be two types. Your authority. Who is your OG? Of what range do you exist on? Let me talk to y'all LA folk about Pomona. Is Pomona in LA or the Inland Empire? What jurisdiction? Well, you're like, well, it's LA County. It's the last city in LA County. Nope, Claremont is. Is it LA or is it IE? Well, it's the 909. Well, the 909 is the IE. What is it subject to its jurisdiction? Well, what is its culture? Its culture is very LA, but then again, so is Ontario. But Ontario's the IE. Nobody questions if Ontario's the IE. What is jurisdiction? Territorial and political. Let me translate this for you. You was born in LA, but you act all New Yorky. You real Easty. Well, that's because you was born here, but your mama from the Bronx. So you talk like your mama. Or you was born here, but you packed up and moved to New York. So you got a real Easty, yeah, son. You walk around here at Tim's. We like LA won't wear Tim's. Oh, man, I was raised in New York. And I'm like, so then you not from LA? He's like, no, I'm from LA. Nigga, no, you not. You are not subject to its territorial and political jurisdiction. You chose Drake, my nigga. You ain't from no LA. How you from LA? You ain't been below the 10. You are not subject to its jurisdiction. So their argument is these people, his family, and in turn him, clearly are subject to the jurisdiction of the Chinese emperor. This man is culturally Chinese. He dressed like it. He sound like you look like a Chinese. So no matter where he was born, he is not also subject to our jurisdiction. He is politically and culturally Chinese. Therefore, he is Chinese. So we can't, I can't call him a citizen according to the 14th Amendment because the 14th Amendment has a caveat. So what is he saying? You know what? He's saying he don't act white. You don't act white. You don't act like us. You ain't never crip walked. You ain't never, you ain't like us. You got an accent. Therefore, you can't possibly be. Is this sounding familiar? He is subject to the jurisdiction and the territorial allegiance to the Chinese. Therefore, he cannot possibly be an American. We obviously don't own a time machine and have not. This is what interesting part. We can't move back in time and prove that he was not born here because, like I said, 3 white people agreed that he was born here. So can't argue that one. But I can argue he's not subject to our jurisdiction. And now it was Wong's lawyer's terms. And do you know what they said in defense? I'm going to translate it to you. For you who are not watching but are listening, I just put my hand, you know when you put your finger, you know when your significant other is obviously lying and you just want to hear the rest of the story, so you put your finger, you kind of got a bald fist with a thumb up under your chin and your finger on the side and you just looking at him, just about like, I'm trying to figure out if this person knows how dumb they sound. Like and you're just like, I can't believe you said that with a straight face. You are dead serious, ain't you? Their defense was, this the dumbest shit I ever heard in my life. Is their defense. What are you talking about? We went through this with the black codes. When y'all said a person can't vote unless their grandparents could vote. Do you think the states, the courts didn't understand what you were saying? This is ridiculous. And furthermore, they said, do you know how many Europeans got here? Hell, we haven't even got to the future of the Homestead Act, which brought a bunch of Europeans here to fill out the West. I've already did an episode on the Homestead Act when the government was giving handouts to poor white people. Government handouts so that they could build wealth. I'm telling you, I can't make this shit up. So if this is the case, if the sons and daughters of Chinese citizens are not citizens, what of the sons and daughters of the English, the Irish, the Germans, the French, the people who have come to the United States? If he ain't a citizen, they ain't a citizen. If that man ain't a citizen, according to your laws, George Washington ain't a citizen. What the hell are you talking about? And let me ask you this. Do it start with your mama? Okay, so if my parents weren't citizens, then that means I'm not. Okay, what about my grandparents? Well, if my grandparents weren't citizens, then that would mean that my parents ain't citizens, which would mean that even though they was born here, I'm not a citizen. Now check this out. What if it was my great-grandparents were the immigrants? Then that would mean that them two non-citizens gave a birth to a non-citizen who gave birth to a non-citizen who gave birth to me. What are you talking about? That means that no one's a citizen. Dumbass, was the argument the Chinese made. The fuck are you talking about? Well, if you got here illegally and you're a child, your parents got here illegally and they gave birth, and neither of you are citizens. Okay, then I need you to dig up every relative, every ancestor you have. I need you, and if you find a single person, then that means that all of the descendants ain't citizens either. You gonna do that? How many people getting deported? You're not gonna do that. Have a tall glass of hort, shut the fuck up. Oh man. And guess what? The court said, touche. You are absolutely correct. And birthright citizenship stood that stress test. Now that was 1896. Now, that poor man Wong Kim Ark was on that boat for 4 months till he was finally able to just go back home. And what did he go back home to? Poverty. His wife's still in China. And I don't know enough of the story to know if he continued to go visit his wife because, like most immigrants, they be scared to leave because apparently the system hasn't figured out who's protected and who's not. So yeah, Trump's talking about birthright citizenship right now. We've been here before. And praise the Lord God Almighty. Hallelujah. The highest praise. Shondo. It worked. Or we stood the stress test. I just don't know if we're gonna stand it again. Bitch, I'm from the land. Don't say you hate LA if you ain't been below the 10. All right, now don't you hit stop on this pod. You better listen to these credits. I need you to finish this thing so I can get the download numbers, okay? So don't stop it yet. But listen, this was recorded in East Los Boyle Heights by your boy Propaganda. Tap in with me at prophiphop.com. If you're into cold brew coffee, we got Terraform Cold Brew. You can go there.com and use promo code HOOD, get 20% off, get yourself some coffee. This was mixed, edited, and mastered by your boy Matt Osowski, killing the beat softly. Check out his website, mattossowski.com. I'm going to spell it for you because I know. MattoSowski.com. mattossowski.com. He got more music and stuff like that on there, so go and check out the heat. Hood Politics is a member of Cool Zone Media, executive produced by Sophie Lichterman, part of the iHeartMedia Podcast Network. Your theme music and scoring is also by the one and only Matt Osowski, still killing the beat softly. So listen, don't let nobody lie to you. If you understand urban living, you understand politics. These people is not smarter than you. We'll see y'all next week.